Hello, my name is Mallon and this is ml.run. In today's video, I want to give you a sneak preview to a product we've been working on called ml.run Studio. But before I get into the demo, I just want to kind of clarify three terms if you haven't read any of my blogs recently or seen any of my videos. And the three terms are the digital doppelganger, digital brain, and dynamic knowledge rendering. So first up, digital doppelganger. What is that? Organizations across the world have lots of information spread across a periphery of systems. And that information, though, is typically stored in text, can be outdated, can be confusing as to which version is relevant to you, and also could be stored in presentations, it could be stored in PDFs, Word documents, images, videos, audio even. And the thing with this information is it's just not easy to get to. And the answer to a lot of people is just stick it all into SharePoint, give people access to folders, and then we'll figure it out. And that's fine, it's kind of worked for many years, but it adds a lot of human interaction because someone has to find it, someone has to get it, someone has to say this is the right one. And we think that this is about to change dramatically. You can see it with things like ChatGPT and Microsoft's recent Copilot announcement that conversational experiences are becoming much more trusting, and also people are starting to get it. They're starting to see a way to use natural language to interact with their technology. And that's what we believe too. However, we want to take it a step further with the introduction of a thing called the digital doppelganger. And what that is a lot of companies think you should just get all your information, you should stick it into one big data lake, and then you can basically communicate with different parts of that lake and extract information. Whereas we disagree. We think that basically you need to have a verticalization of a thing, and that is the digital doppelganger. So your marketing department, your employee handbook, your software development role, all these things can be represented in a digital doppelganger. And a digital doppelganger is simple. It is an AI model. It might be an LLM. It might be something more statistical. It's basically pulling information from one or many or zero sources and providing you a natural language way to interact with it. Now, if you have this doppelganger and you can say things like the employee handbook, what are my benefits? The employee guidelines, like what's the color schema we can use on websites? These doppelgangers you can talk to as a human, but also the doppelgangers can talk to each other as well. They can also talk to external services and APIs through natural language too, similar to how ChatGPT plugins work if you've seen them. Now, if you put all these doppelgangers together and you basically wrap them in the organizational structure, you get what we're defining as the digital brain. This digital brain is a collection of doppelgangers that all communicate with each other, but also all humans communicate with ones that have been authorized to do so. And this, we believe, is going to revolutionize how people find information. Now, where we want to take it the one step further is with what we're defining as dynamic knowledge rendering. So much so that we coined this term. And what it is that all this information you see out there is going to be stored in a document of some sort, typically. And if it's a contract, it's going to be in legalese. If it's a HR video, it may be from 10 years ago. And it may not even be in your native tongue. So what if you could take all that information, feed it into these digital doppelgangers, and you could then output it into completely personalized content? And that is what dynamic knowledge rendering is. For you to really absorb knowledge in your brain, you need to be presented with information in a form factor that relates to you. It could be a podcast in the voice of Louis Theroux. It could be a brand guidelines in a comic book strip around Pokemon. Whatever it may be, we now have the tools and the technology to be able to personalize this information to you. And this, obviously, we're very much focusing around the employee experience. The same thing can happen with your customers as well. Now, when we take that information, we can then basically give a unprecedented level of personalization. And then you as a human, you can specify more preferences. Like, this is how I want to be communicated with when I talk to the marketing department or this particular role. And let's say marketing aren't available, you can talk to their doppelganger and ask for statuses on projects, ask for what the brand guidelines are, ask what the social media schedule is for when a post is going to go out. This is the revolution that we believe is here and very soon coming to organizations like yourselves. Now, how do you even quantify this to be a thing? Well, this is where ml.run Studio, we hope, is going to come. Like, as I said, it's still very early. This is a preview, and we've got a long way to come to turn it into the product we hope and want to exist in the world. But we're going to start to roll it out very slowly. The key for us here, though, is that we are building a tool for enterprises. A lot of people are building software solutions where you have to log in, it's hosted elsewhere. All of ml.run solutions you can run inside of your enterprise infrastructure. Typically Microsoft Azure, you can spin up an instance, you can spin up your own models, your own ChatGPT instances, your own Llama models, whatever model you so wish, you can then plug it into ml.run. And any plugins that have been enabled, you can turn on and off based on your comfort level with regards to their communication to the outside world. So let me just give you a very quick run through of how this works. So like any tool, there's this concept of teams. So if you join it, you might be an employee team, you might be part of the technology team or the marketing team. Nothing massively revolutionary there, all backed by AD as well if you want to authenticate. The key comes with this idea of doppelgangers. Now a doppelganger is, like I mentioned before, a representation of something. In this case, you can see the marketing department, the employee handbook, brand guidelines, compliance, the CEO's office. You want to get a quote for the business, you can go and ask the doppelganger of the CEO and get a quote from them. And then also more technically vertical things such as the DevOps pipeline, the code repository, all these things where you can start asking other systems for information. Now, if I just go into, say, the employee handbook, now as you can see, this interface has basically a list of conversations and data sources. So if I click a new conversation, it looks very much like a lot of these conversational systems, chatbots, and things like ChatGPT and stuff. Now, I can ask for things like, what are the key employee benefits? Now, currently, this is all done through the ml.run studio interface, but there's no reason why this is not going to come through Teams, Slack, etc., etc. But it just gives you a centralized way to store this information. Now, this information in data sources, I'll show you in a second, is all fed just from a document that's been uploaded, which was the company employee guidelines. So if I just go into here, you can see just the handbook has been uploaded. And then I can have these conversations. I could have had links, I can add preferences as well also. Now I get my basically benefits returned back off here. Now this conversation by default is private. If I turn it off from being private, what that means is that anyone who has access to the doppelganger can see it. So if I say that, for example, I can just call this key employee benefits and just rename it. And that means anyone who comes in doesn't even have to ask a question. They can just quickly see the conversation and say, oh, that's potentially the thing I'm after. Now, I can delete the conversation thread. I can obviously set it to private, so it's just me. And as time goes on, we'll develop this even further. And these doppelgangers can exist for anything. The key is you're just basically pulling in information, setting preferences, and then being able to communicate with it. Now, I'm going to very quickly explain some of the other aspects of ml.run Studio. First up is workflows. So workflows is once you have these doppelgangers and they're doing what you want, they're holding this information and they give you this ability to talk to them, like you might want to do some cool stuff. So this is where we've created this idea called workflows. And workflows are building blocks that you can basically talk to third-party systems and as well as doppelgangers inside of a chain of events. So let me just give you an example. So this is basically an outline of a key point. So as you can see here on the editor, it's just got two blocks. It's basically going to a new URL to extract information, and then it's going to run it through a ChatGPT conversation instance and save out the output. Now, if I go to results and I just run the workflow, all I have to do is drop in the URL. So I drop in a URL for an article, it will go off, it will grab the key points of the article, and it will then save them in a document inside of ml.run. I could, if we jump back to workflows, you can see things like brand guidelines, content review. I could take them, that URL and them key points. I could then also grab the block for the doppelganger for brand guidelines and say, pass these key points to guidelines, and then bring me back a response that passes guidelines. I can also, if I have a quote, I can say, look, turn this quote into the CEO's voice to synthesize because I need to put it into a podcast. Workflows become this powerful tool that can be used across all different things. Now, one part of workflow is that it can output assets. And as you can see here, we've got a few articles. Now, I'm just going to pick in this one. This is a document around ESG impact. Now, here we have an article that's been generated off the back of this. Now, inside of our editor, we have a thing called narrative and also assistant. So narrative is basically when you create a new document, you can say, this is what this blog or this article is about. And then when you ask any questions to the assistant or to the doppelganger within the document, it understands the context of which the document's about. if you want to search for any images, it will pre-prompt the fact that it's an ESG impact article about floating hotels. Now, we have an editor very similar to, kind of very basic Google Docs, but you can add in blocks. And these blocks can be images. We're going to expand on this as time goes on, but I can also add in Doppelganger, and I can ask the Doppelganger a question and say, write me a paragraph about how ESG will affect bridges within this sector. And it'll just go off. Tell me about bridges. I can also, as that's going off, I can do this multiple times. I can have multiple Doppelgangers going off and saying, and looking up stuff. I can also ask the assistant, as I'm doing it, give me a list of 10 floating hotels in the world. So as I'm writing this document, I can just have that information available to me on the side. Now, this is powering from your own company spun up large language model in the background. And as we create more and more documents, we'll start to add in things like video generation, images. You can see that in the workflows, there was the idea that you can generate the sound snippet of the CEO's voice. Again, that will appear in the edit as an audio file as well. Sorry, I'm going off now because I'm getting a bit excited. Right, that was a very quick demo of what ml.run Studio is. We think that organizations need a way to use these tools that they can run inside their infrastructure, but also have the aesthetics of a consumer application, and that's what we're hopefully building here. If you have any feedback, please let me know. If you are a company and you think this looks interesting, again, also, please get in touch. Thank you very much for your time.